Hi, everyone. I'm Raquel, Bozzi, Senior Director of Education and International Initiatives at Film Independent. Welcome to this Film Independent Presents conversation with Fernando Frías de la Parra, who is the director of Ya no estoy aquí. In English, I'm no longer here, which is currently on Netflix. Check it out because you're in for a treat. Before we start, I want to thank our lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and our virtual screening partner, Vision Media. And with that, welcome, Fernando.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here because I have a lot of questions for you. First of all, congratulations on this beautiful film, and thank you for opening this kind of Pandora's box for me. I'm fascinating, and I'm fascinated that you have opened this window to this place where Colombia is an aspiration, and I'm going to explain. I'm Colombian. I'm from Cartagena, Colombia, and I grew up. This is where Cumbia comes from. So I grew up with Cumbia all around. So I'm fascinated to find this community, this young community that is in awe of Cumbia and has taken the form and turned it upside down and slowed it and made out of it this beautiful urban art form. So how did you come across this world? Because I'm familiar with Mexican culture and I have some connections to Mexico, and I never heard about, of course I've heard cumbia being played in every party all around Latin America, but I never heard of cumbia being such an aspirational art form and counterculture in Monterrey.
Well, I think, I as you say, like cumbia is a big part of, not only it was born in Colombia, where you're from, of course, but it's a big part of like the whole Latin American spectrum. You have cumbia in Peru, you have like cumbia villera in Argentina, which is something really big. You have cumbia sonidera in Mexico with the block parties, and the big like sound systems. But like originally the cumbia is from Colombia, and there's like different kind of cumbias. So when you ask me how did I find out about this particular group, I have to say that I don't know, like it was many years ago, around 2006, I guess, when a friend of mine went to Monterrey and for like an artist residence program, and he came back with an MP3 for me, an MP3 CD, like with all these songs. But I don't know if that's the correct answer, because since the 90s, I was familiar with a musician called Celso Piña, which is like very well known, and he just recently died, sadly. But he was like the pioneer of the Mexican Colombian cumbia, right? So he was an accordion player, and he was doing songs and playing this kind of music since the 70s, with his band called Ronda Bogotá. But I guess I came across with it around like the late 90s, when there were being like some kind of like a crossover, like he was contributing with some like rap artists that I followed, and at the same time there were like the cholo culture was like something that we were more like aware of, and we in the wider spectrum of like Mexico started celebrating, because there's legacy from like the first like Chicanos that like the first immigrants from like Mexico to the US, there were like many like different kind of like cultural like manifestations, you know, in not only in Texas but also in California, and all of like the my family kind of like thing, you know, and the whole look and all of the aspects. So I knew about like cholos, I knew about this culture, I knew about salsa piña, but I have to say that the very specifics of like the slow down, the rebajada version, yeah, it was around 2006 or something, around that period of time. And then I saw some articles, more from like how can I call it, you know, like this young journalistic approach to like counterculture or subculture. But I was not really in. There was this very popular magazine, you know, that likes to do stuff around like this kind of like movements, and I saw what they did, and it was and they showed like incredible photographs about their style, but to me it was they were only focusing in those aspects, not even in the music or in the meanings, you know. It was just like, and it felt somehow wrong or incomplete, because it was just like oh, it just seemed very colonialist, you know, in the sense of like, oh, look, this new specimen that we found, you know, look how they look, how exotic they are, you know. And so it was for me, I've always worked around cultural clash, you know. And so through the music I was able to connect and start like breaking down what was behind those looks and those gatherings, and that like more as a social phenomena, or as a from an anthropology, or at least ethnographic point of view, rather than just like a fashion curiosity, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had here. Like it's almost like an anthropology that you're doing through this world of music, and I really love the way, you know, these kids are really mixing. They take the cumbia, but then they're throwing in hip hop, and you know, even the Mexican Aztec danza del águila. You know, it's some of it's all in one thing. And I think it definitely talks to the culture of a contemporary culture of a border like the one that they're living in Monterrey, Mexico. Um, I I wanted to talk a little bit because through this beautiful world that, you know, in itself is very entertaining and cinematic, you are going through some very serious social political undertones. That the film has some major political undertones for the audience. Because you don't really set it in specifically in this time, except for some of the radio, you know, messaging. For the audience who doesn't know, can you talk a little bit about what period of Mexican contemporary history this is set in, and what are the dynamics that are presented in Monterrey at that time?
Of course. Well, first off, Monterrey is like a very important city. It's like the commercial capital of the Mexican North. It's like the third biggest city after, you know, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and then Monterrey. But like Monterrey, the state is called Nuevo León, and it's almost in the border with Texas. And it has a very particular history because it's on the desert, you know, like very Texan weather, kind of arid, hot and cold. And then it was founded by only like 12 families that adopted the pragmatism of the Texan Protestantism, and they developed like it's actually the first industrial city in Latin America, the first one. They melt iron, and they have all these like plants for that, and did a lot of like concrete and asphalt factories over there. And they grew as a city that needed immigrants to work, labor, and people from other places came, particularly from this place called Bajío in Mexico, like San Luis Potosí and other places. So that's how those like hills, because Monterrey had these very beautiful hills, like got populated by these immigrants, you could say. And they related to cumbia because originally, because like the people in control, like the people with money, they were looking up to Texan culture and like listening to this norteña music, whereas the hand labor people, they connected deeply with the cumbia from Colombia because of the lyrics of the songs, which are like very nostalgic, especially those with the accordion, which like experts would say it's the voice of like sadness or like longing, so all of the lyrics were like, oh, how I miss my place here, how I miss my woman, my farm, the beach, in Colombia. So, well, Monterrey has this kind of history. It's very, very, very polarized in terms of like, also like for people, this might be interesting to know, but Monterrey has the richest municipality in the whole Latin America, San Pedro Garza, and in the same hill is like the richest neighborhood, you could say, like not only from Mexico but like from Latin America, and on the other side of the same mountain, there's this like favela like settlements, right? And they don't touch each other, and there's actually like an urban plan for the marginalized people or stigmatized people to stay there and not come down to the city. And there's not even public transportation that it's effective, and it's crazy, and so the film is set in Monterrey, but 10 years ago, when President Calderon was in office, and that's the voice of the president you can listen to in the radio in the film. And so it's not a specific like 2011 or 2012, but it's around that period of time, because that's where like the very, in my opinion, poor strategy of like fighting the drug trade was like, like said like in started this president's strategy of like this frontal combat apparently against like this drug trade. And it was a really wrong strategy, in my opinion, like I said, because at the beginning of it, like the new cartels were like kidnapping the kids to force them to work for them. But at the end of the strategy, it was so wrong by sending the militaries to the streets that at the end, the kids were like taking the side of the cartels, just because, of course, that's more familiar. That's, it's been like a marginalized community, and all the gangs were like, oh, we're going to join forces with the people who we know, not with this uniform, like abstract figure that comes like breaking my door, and coming into our breaking into our houses in such way, So so as I researched this project and this phenomena, I saw the movement like fading out, because there was a very dark period of time in Monterrey history, where like this one cartel, like the muscle, you could say, of the cartel, that was a group that came out of the Mexican military, formed their own cartel, and they were fighting their cartel that they used to work for before. So they wanted to create their new cartel, and they were like recruiting kids from the streets and fighting and scaring the population and doing like almost like terrorist attacks, in which like there's like many cases of like really dark episodes, of 18-year-old kids, like killing many people, like they set on fire a casino because they were asking for money for like if you have a business, you have to contribute to this new cartel, like you have to pay a fee, and there was like this famous case in which like this casino didn't want to pay, and they burned the whole thing with all the people inside, pregnant women. It was like really bad. And at the same time, there were other things, and it was something that escalated the violence in Mexico like never before, you know, like never, ever, ever before. And it was in response to a very particular strategy from the government, which was clearly not working. And the ego of that administration that didn't want to like reevaluate what they were doing. So I saw the movement fading because there was no life on the streets anymore, you know, and people couldn't look each other in the eye. Everyone was looking down. There was curfew. So that's that's when the film is somehow relatively set around, so that it works for the story when because you know, like, even there's a scene when they're looking at the news, you know, and there's like a gunfight outside a kindergarten, and the teacher is telling the kids, you know, to and those are real things. So it's all to say, you know, like, this kid, when the protagonist Ulises comes back, nothing is there for him, and hence the title of the film, you know.
So everybody has moved on, either looking for Jesus or
yeah, I mean, what I mean, that's that idea of looking for Jesus, or like the guy who's dead. It's you know, a little bit to talk about the lack of social of upward mobility, lack of opportunities. What are the exit doors if you belong to that world, you know? And then you have to believe in something that it's out of this world, or you are like 6 feet under, you know.
Yeah, and I think you did this really well. Did that really well, because you didn't make a movie about that, but we experienced that, you know, and we experience it through this very rich experience that is the life of these kids, and their love for cumbia, and their camaraderie and their relationship. I really love that. And I want to point out to actually the performances, and I want to ask you how you cast this movie, because this film feels very authentic and natural and of that world. It doesn't feel like you took something in there and started messing with it. So how did that happen? And how was the casting? And then how did you shoot there?
Thanks. I don't. Yeah, like you say, that the film is certainly not about that. You know, what we were talking about before. The film, it's more about the interior life of one particular character, Ulises. You know, because as you can see in the film, in New York, he doesn't really have that much of a hard time. You know, there are like way more tragic stories of immigration, you know, or crossing the border, and so it was not about that. But there was a point to it not being another film that, you know, like joined the conversation from the same angle. Not everyone who is here in the States as an immigrant wants to be here, so I just wanted to fight that narrative, you know, and the reinforcement of stereotypes that it's like systematically like pushed and done through the media and other forms and politics, of course. But so the casting process, in terms of like this authenticity that you mentioned, I appreciate you saying that. Sometimes people actually from Mexico, you know, like, I don't know what they're expecting. I think sometimes people are expecting somewhat of a version of blood in, blood out, or a gang film, you know, and because it's about cholos and they want to see, like, you know, like dying for your homies and all that kind of thing. And so they, in some like critics, they criticize, they say, this film is like a documentary, but like, you know, as if it was like a bad thing. And for me, it's like a compliment. I think it's, yeah, when I read those comments, I'm like, well, that's great. Also because I not only because of like the texture and veracity of the scenes, but overall because of like the way I'm trying to build this story. The story is only an excuse to connect certain dots, and I bet I'm definitely, as you can see, betting on the juxtaposition of like small moments that maybe alone are not informing enough, but all together create more like the addition of all of its parts is bigger than, you know, like the kids, this is like the question that I'm asked more often, and for me it's very hard to respond it, because behind every casting decision of this film there's a story worth saying. So for me, it's like, of course, the protagonist has a bigger weight in the film, but each story, each character has a story. None of these kids have ever acted before it, and I never intended to work with professional actors. First, because um, they're so young that it's hard to have like professional actors from that age, from that particular region, and maybe, or like someone who can dance and know how to. I didn't know the argot and all of the ways of speaking, like, because for our non-Spanish speaking friends, it's worth saying that the film sometimes needs to be for I mean, not sometimes, all of the times, for Spanish speaking audiences, with subtitles for like neutral Castellano, neutral Spanish, um, because of such particular way and such florid language, which I really like. So at the beginning, I didn't know that, and I wanted to work with these people who are from that world. Also, because of the film is somehow about representation and about identity. I would never see this film with other people trying to act. At some point, the producers in Mexico said like, "Oh, we have to do it with actors," and and for me it was out of the question. But so 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 like the casting process was it was a very immersive experience in like the neighborhoods, and a lot of people asked me also with expecting like maybe like a tougher story of like, yeah, it was super difficult to get there because of all the narcos who rule over there. But not really. Like, we were absolutely welcome with the open arms, to shoot there. And if we were genuinely interested in those communities and the story of those places. So people, whenever they convinced themselves through like an interaction with us that was our angle, they were super welcoming. And it was really hard because talent is not it what's the hardest to find over there. The hardest to find is just like a stability in their lives. These are kids whose life have changed or can change drastically from one day to the next. As like when they're 16, they're always like they're already with 2 or 3 kids. Crazy. Or they're having to move from one place to the other. Like they're living in tough circumstances. Or they have to support and help their family. So it's hard for them to like say, oh, now I'm gonna join a casting process maybe, and I might not be selected. There's no time to do that. So these tercos didn't know each other before the film, but it was like carving out like, oh, this one has something, yeah. Until at some point, before rehearsing or before assigning any role, I said, now I need to work with you for real. And it was just like a summer camp. Let's this is going to be like a paid gig, and I don't know who is going to be who in the film yet, but all of you are going to have a part in the film, and we need to start working. And then we created the Tercos, and then there were like so many different ways, of coaching them in terms of like learning how like a set works, in terms of like hitting the mark and stuff like that. Because acting and talent and that was really extraordinary for me in what these kids brought, and I didn't have to work much with that. None of them, however, were or belonged to this movement. They knew cumbias, but for very different reasons. Since this film is like 10 years late of when this actually happened, so some lived it through their mother. Like the little kid sweatshirt. His mother is like a big cumbia fan, and so he loves cumbia because it's his mother. Derek, Juan Daniel, the protagonist, Ulises, he never had that style at all, but he remembers being like 6 and looking to his friends and uncles, his brothers, older brothers and uncles dressed up like that. So they were just giving life to something that they were personally not part of, but that they experienced or experimented one way or the other.
That's a beautiful story. I love that you did that. When you were talking about the way they talk, I gotta be honest with you, and a lot of the cuss words are Colombian words, and I know them all, but they interweave them so together that it's so hard to understand. And many times I found myself looking at the English subtitles because I couldn't understand what they were saying. But that is really beautiful how you work with them. We have a lot of questions, but I just want to ask you a few more. About the story structure, and you know, there's some sense of, first there's kind of an atemporal sense of it where, you know, even including the technology, you know, there's anything from an MP3 player to the to the boombox to, as you know, a cell phone that takes pictures, to a flip phone, to the phone booth. So it's hard to kind of capture the time, but also in terms of the story structure, any timing going back and forth um, between the past and the present. And I love that because there's only one time, if I'm correct, if I'm not wrong, where you identify 4 months before, but the rest of it comes in and out. And I really didn't notice. I was pretty much in the moment with him most of the time. And the story works so much at that level. I'm curious about how was writing that script from that perspective, and also from the language perspective. Did you write those dialogues with that type of language?
Yeah, no, I thank you. And I love what you say about like being present with the film. I mean, it took me a while to write this story and also like to complete this project, many years actually. And at some point, I was working with a. I mean, I wrote the script alone, but I asked a friend of mine who's a writer to read it, and he's a novelist, and he said, well, because the film was non-linear, it was intercut, but way less than it is right now. And he told me, if you're gonna go for it, if you're gonna like you just break this linearity, just go for it, you know. And I felt that absolutely made sense. And so jumps in times, like there's so much to say about it. And so I'll start from like the less important or like the most technical, and then from there I'll talk a little bit about the choices. But first of all, you know, like being elliptical helps you helps you eliminate or obviate some very, I don't know, like some details, like how did he cross the border? You know, like all this and that. You can just be jumping and go to the heart of the story, you know. And then the story is minimal, as I say. For me, like like film, it's not only like a way to do storytelling, but also to show different ways into looking at things, you know. So I wanted on purpose to break this timeline, because I feel like the past is not necessarily behind us, you know. Like the past can be ahead of us when like they don't, when it's like emotional enough or like hurting so much that it won't let you move on, or you know, or where it's like invading your present because you are like still in the past. So the idea of like past being behind and future being ahead, it's just like a construction, a consensus that we have as a society. But I don't think it's necessarily that way. And I also feel like it was important for me that you felt as an audience before you could start understanding, you know. Like sometimes people are like, where am I, you know, but you are with the character, you know. And that feeling of like, where am I, it's very, very natural, you know, because it's like an analogy of like the way we feel sometimes in terms of like feeling lost or confused, you know. So I don't know, when you follow a very didactic narrative that it's very like demanding in terms of like the rationality, or all, or the opposite, it's guiding you through the plot and through the yeah, like rational aspects of it. Then you start thinking about emotions but not feeling the emotions. So I felt that it's important to be with the character before knowing where you were specifically, you know. And little by little, I mean, I'm not guiding the audience by the hand, you know, like now you're here, now you're there. So those are the things that are behind that decision. And also it multiplied the possibilities of like combining the story in such ways, because it's like exponentially, you know, like it's very close to what was written in terms of like things, that how things are together, you know, one another. But we are starting the film where we started in somewhere that was not the beginning, you know, like that was written in the middle of the film. So it was very interesting to explore all of these combinations of going back and forth.
And I really love that you left the way he left to the end, you know. And I figured out, oh my God, that's the way he did it. And I love that you did not have any stories with coyotes or, you know, the migra, you know, all that stuff. Like we've seen enough, right?
Yeah.
So I really love that way. And it felt like those kind of sandboxes where you shake, shake, shake until it kind of starts coming. And then,
I
oh,
love that.
the
Yeah.
whole picture is there. And, you know, but I was so immersed that I didn't care, like, where am I, like you're saying.
I love that image of the sandbox. I normally say that it's like a puzzle where you lost the cover of the box and you only like start putting pieces together, and then it kind of like hurts because then you realize that you're missing some of the pieces. But you can see the image, you know, so it feels like, oh, ouch, we have an ouch ending. But yeah, I like that idea of like the progressive revelation of what it is, you know.
Yeah, so that was beautiful. I have one last question before I go to the other questions here. Uh, well, the style of the film is a really cinematic, but without being flashy and or calling attention to itself. I mean, from the costume design to the production design, from, you know, the little objects that I talked a lot about a little before, and the cinematography. How did you work with your team to achieve this? And also, it's cinematic in the way it kind of follows the dance almost as a lead. I don't know. It kind of takes a lot of cues from the dance, I feel.
Well, one of the reasons behind doing this film and the way it's done is a response directly to how I saw Mexican films and Latin American films um, wanting to talk about our tragic history as very conflictuated ex-colonies and you know, very divided societies, like with war and with different guerrillas or like different situations historically. And I felt that there was a big movement that was very well recognized, maybe in other parts of the world, that somehow served or exploited, for lack of a better word, this like tragic situation, you know, and the social drama of it. But I was not sure if the people that were represented in those films that were like highly celebrated could see themselves represented, you know. So for me, it was really important to connect to how the people I'm trying to talk to see themselves or value themselves, you know. And then as a filmmaker, I had to ask myself like the hard question of like, okay, I'm an outsider and I want to look at this. What is like the window through which I'm gonna look at this, you know? And I never had the intention of like doing a score because it will tell you how to feel. I don't like when music is telling you what to feel, but I also did never want to do handheld, you know, and that, because it was like accentuating this like social drama kind of thing, you know, and it's telling you how to feel again. And so these are somehow flashbacks when, you know, because we start New York and all that, and the memory, it's definitely impacted by the way you feel about things rather than the way you remember them specifically, you know, like, so the way you feel about things definitely affect how you remember them, right? Because you remember how you felt. So like, by looking into this way, this tableau, if you want, it's more like a way of trying to look in the same way and be respectful to what it meant for the character. And if you see, like, I mean, in terms of the dancing, of course, there's like this spontaneity, you know, all of a sudden it's just like a jam session with musicians, but like here it's just like dancing, you know. And in the same way, like the drive-by scene, it just happens in the blink of an eye. So it was the same idea. Let's not cut, let's not do anything flashy. We're not here for the shock, you know, of like guns and pa 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 and 80 cuts and whatever. It was just one take, you know. And there was like a, throughout the whole film, the language is the same, you know, like to establish this parallel from the space, you know, like with Monterrey and New York, it's framed in a similar way, but like in Monterrey, in New York, it's more claustrophobic, you know. It's like how the characters feel in a different situation. And so the way of observing, I don't know if I achieved it, but I'm trying to observe in the same way, even if what I'm observing it's different, you know, just to establish that, you know, like just like the tempo of the dancing, you know. I co-edit this film and with Gibran, and when I had the file, I remember that I was working on that scene where they dance for like 3 minutes and it's not cut, and I showed it to him, and he told me, "Why? Let's leave sooner." And I'm like, "No, I feel like that's the beauty of the moment, you know. We just have to keep it, you know." And then he agreed, and it worked, you know, and because it feels that it worked in the same way with the way we're tackling violence and other stuff, you know.
That's great. So here's some questions. One from Mary Lynn. Where can we stream your earlier film Receta in the US? Also, can you speak to the cinematography? You already spoke about that, I feel.
Yeah.
And how did you prep with the DP? I think we spoke briefly. How did the sharp angles on street corners come about, and beautiful visual storytelling? So Receta, where can we
Thank you,
see?
Marilyn. Receta used to be on Netflix. Shout out to Netflix so that they can bring it back. But I think right now it's on something called Cinepolis Click. But yeah, it's there in stream. But sometimes people write me, and sometimes if we see those messages, we send them the film, and so it's there. It's this is to say that the film is available. And then with the cinematography, Damian is one of my best friends, you know, and we don't even talk in terms of visuals, you know. We just understand each other very well, and I had an idea of something, and he just like elevated it just like highly, and it was, yeah. I mean, sometimes there's like there was, to be entirely honest, very happy accidents, but mostly it was taking a lot of care of the frame because of what basically, yeah, we were framing a whole situation because there are not so many cuts, you know, and it's like very long takes. In New York, we didn't have any money to shoot, like, and you know, because New York, it's super complicated. Like, we didn't have the subway, we didn't have many things, you know. So we had to be way more practical, and there were not so many lights and stuff. So we just tried to embrace the situation and use it in our favor. And yeah, that was it, you know.
So you answered a little bit of a question that comes later about, well, how was it like shooting in Jackson Heights? But here's a question from Kelly. I knew nothing about this world. I loved Capitol, your film. Any plans for a sequel?
Thank you, Kelly. That's very funny because in Monterrey, the film has been very well received in Mexico, and I'm overwhelmed with joy and happiness, and and really touched, because I never expected it to become something as it is in Mexico, and everyone is asking about the sequel, but for the moment it's not in the horizon. And however, because of this film, a lot of people in from Monterrey, and I really try to read everything, and not only from Monterrey, but the people in Mexico and other places in Latin America have like shared with me their life stories or like different things. And there are a couple of very interesting stories, and one of them I started to look into, and it's set in Monterrey in a similar landscape, we could say. So it wouldn't officially or in any way be a sequel, but it could be something related, and maybe it would satisfy the appetite for a sequel, which I appreciate.
And here's Carl, a little bit, you touched upon it a little bit. He says, I live in Queens area you used for the scenes in New York City. It was great to see. What was it like shooting in Jackson Heights and along the 7th train?
Hostile. People keep asking, like, I mean, Jackson Heights is an incredible community, and there were a lot of very friendly people, but it was more in terms of like, oh my God, New York is hostile. Like I was just before coming here to do this talk, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were discussing about New York, and like I'm from Mexico. I'm from Mexico City, and it's easier just to be in the streets in Mexico. For me, because, for example, here from the little things, like you need to use the bathroom, and here in New York it's like, no, customers only, super hostile. And then the weather is hostile, and then everything is noisy, and everything is industrial, and then it's like it rains, there's super hot, super cold, like you have the subway being super noisy, so New York is like not for everyone, and I've been here for 11 years living in New York, and we shot in New York 1 year after finishing Monterrey, because of many complications that we could talk for hours. Very interesting complications, but we had to wait, because one of them being the winter and yada yada, financing, wada wada. But then when we shot in Monterrey, in New York, as I said, we needed to be small, because for example, we stole the shots in the subway, and we had one take, and many of the things on the street, we just had one take. There were so many things that we couldn't use, and we planned to some steady following the kid in the streets in Jackson Heights that looked incredible, but people were like really rude, and would come to the camera, and like they would not cooperate at all. New York, it's really tough. And also the mobility here was extremely heavy, like like in Mexico, I am the camera is here, and then there's like we're in the sidewalk looking to the other side of the sidewalk. But then Damian or I would be like, Damian is the DP, oh, did you see that there's someone with I don't know, like a card with the steam coming out, let's go there. I'm like, yeah, sure. And the Mexican crew would be like, yeah, let's go. And here it was very difficult. We were like, hey, we need to move there. No, we were told that to come here, and they were taking, like, unscrewing the camera, and like really, really giving us such attitude. And I remember how many things we lost because of that. And by the time they were ready, like with this, the thing has already gone, And Damian told me, I've never experienced anything like that in my life, shooting in the subway, like they were like, no, we are not gonna do this. Okay, you're not gonna do it, we'll do it. Who wants to do it? Okay, so we ended up doing it, and we only had one take. But people in Jackson Heights, I mean, also New York, it's all this country. It's all about money. Who can help you? Like the Colombian bar and all that. They were super nice, and the women that work as extras, they were super nice. They were really good, but sometimes they couldn't help as much as they want, because the location was like, all we could afford was like 30 minutes, and it was already after pushing so much, and that happened once and again, like there's the scene where like he's like laying down after he cut his hair, and we paid the money, which was expensive, to have a police car coming, and picking up. And when the real police officer saw what we were doing, he said, no, I'm not allowing you to do another take. But why? Is it about the story or why? No explanations. I'm taking off. But we already paid. Yeah, you're not getting back your money. So he took his police car. So shooting in New York was exhausting and hostile.
Okay.
Much more than Mexico. Everyone asks me like, how did you get into those neighborhoods? Well, just asking and connecting with people like the way it's supposed to be, you know? But here,
we are running out of time, but not out of questions. One last one, which is just one word. What type of camera did you use from Cecilia?
It's an Alexa Mini from Ari with anamorphic lenses.
Well, I have to congratulate you again. Thank you for making this movie. I really enjoyed it. And actually, it has taken me into this tunnel of finding more about these people. And I'm asking people in Mexico, have you heard about this? And actually, I actually, yesterday, my sister lives in Mexico City, and I texted her and I said, have you heard about this Colombia culture in Monterrey? And she said, no, but my husband and his son just watched a great movie about it. And I'm like, you're kidding me. So they watched it and they loved it. And so their son is a film major. So there you go. They're watching it in Mexico and they like it. So
Great.
Congratulations. Thank you. And have a great evening in New York.
Likewise. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.